If someone told me years ago that the boy who once laughed at me would look at me the way he does now, like I was the last breath of air in his lungs, I would have called them insane. Funny how life loves to flip the script when you've already stopped caring about the ending. The first time I saw Noah Carter again, it wasn't in a high school hallway or a random bar reunion. It was at my photography exhibit in downtown Chicago 6 years after I'd left our dusty little town behind. Cameras flashed, people murmured my name, and there he was standing at the back of the room, hands buried in his pockets, his blue eyes locked on a picture he didn't realize was about him. The photograph was titled "The Boy on the Bridge." He didn't know it yet, but that picture, the silhouette of a teenage boy standing by a lake under a burning sunset, was taken the day I left home. The day I swore I'd never think about Noah again. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky where everyone knew everything about everyone who cheated, who prayed, who didn't, who was different. I was the different one. The quiet kid with the sketchbook and headphones, always avoiding eye contact and pretending the world didn't hurt as much as it did. Noah was the golden boy, captain of the baseball team, Sunday church favorite, the kind of boy who got away with everything because he smiled like he meant it. We were the same age, same school, same town, but lived in different worlds. He lived under stadium lights. I lived in shadows. And still, I loved him. Loved him in the way you love something that could ruin you silently, hopelessly, from a safe distance. The thing about small towns is that secrets don't stay buried. When someone saw me looking at him too long, the whispers started. When he caught me sketching him once, the laughter began. And when I finally gathered the courage to tell him the truth, to say I liked him, the betrayal came, sharp and cold as winter air. He didn't hit me. He didn't even yell. He just laughed. Loud enough for his friends to hear. That laughter burned itself into my ribs. It was the sound of something breaking me. So I left. The day after graduation, I packed my camera, my sketchbook, and a heart that didn't know how to heal. Chicago was chaos, traffic, lights, noise, but it was also freedom. Nobody there cared who I was or who I loved. Nobody there called me names in the hallway or told me to man up. I started taking pictures of everything I couldn't say in words. The loneliness, the beauty, the quiet ache of people trying to belong somewhere. And slowly, the world started noticing. By 24, I had my first solo show. By 26, I was standing in that gallery, wearing a black suit and pretending the applause didn't make me nervous. And then Noah showed up. He looked older, harder. The kind of man who'd learned that life doesn't hand out second chances easily. He waited until the crowd thinned, until I was free, before walking up to me like a ghost from a life I'd buried. "Eli," he said, softly, like he wasn't sure he had the right to say my name anymore. I turned, camera still hanging around my neck. "Didn't think I'd see you here." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Guess I just wanted to see what the quiet kid from homeroom became." I laughed, but it came out sharper than I intended. "Yeah? Well, I became someone who stopped caring what people like you think." He flinched, barely noticeable, but I caught it. "Eli, I cut him off. Not here. Not after 6 years." For a second, he looked like he wanted to say more. But the weight of silence pressed between us until it became unbearable. Then, like the coward he used to be, he left, disappearing into the crowd before I could decide if I wanted him to stay. That night, I went home and stared at the picture, the boy on the bridge. Noah had always been that boy. Alone, brave, beautiful, afraid. And maybe, deep down, I had taken that picture hoping one day he'd see it and remember. But I didn't expect what came next. A week later, a letter arrived at my studio. No name, no return address, just my name in messy, familiar handwriting. I tore it open. "You once told me that the bridge was a place where you felt like the world finally stopped judging you. I went there last week. Still quiet, still lonely. I'm sorry I laughed. I was scared, Eli. I still am. Can we talk? Noah." It's strange, the way time changes people. The way apologies can reopen wounds you thought had scarred over. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to burn the letter. Another part wanted to drive straight back to Kentucky. In the end, I did neither. I sent him a photo instead, the one of the same bridge taken recently. No words, just light, just memory. 2 days later, he called. The call lasted only 4 minutes, but it changed everything. Eli, he said, voice trembling slightly, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want a chance to see you. To explain. Explain what? That you were young? Scared? We all were. I know. But I'm not that kid anymore. I'm not running from who I am. There was a pause, long enough for me to hear him breathe. I'm still in Kentucky, he said finally. If you ever come back, the bridge is waiting. For a week, I tried to forget it. But the truth is, I'd never stopped wanting to hear his voice again. So I drove 6 hours through the Midwest, back to the town that raised and broke me. The roads looked smaller, the houses older. The people, some of them still the same, stared as I passed. And when I reached the lake, the bridge was still their old wood, peeling paint, endless sky. Noah was waiting. He looked up as I stepped out of the car, wind rustling through the trees. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled, the same crooked smile that used to undo me, only softer now, humbler. Didn't think you'd actually come, he said. Didn't think I would either, I replied. We stood there, silence thick between us. Finally, I asked, Why now, Noah? He sighed. Because I couldn't keep pretending. Every time I looked at someone else, I kept seeing you. My chest tightened. You had your chance. I know. And I ruined it. He stepped closer. But if there's any part of you that still remembers us, even if it was just a fantasy, I need you to know that I'm not ashamed anymore. I swallowed hard, the wind cold against my face. Why tell me this? Because, he whispered, you were the first person who ever made me feel like I was allowed to be myself. And I hate that I made you pay for it. I didn't answer. Couldn't. The years of anger, pain, love, they all tangled together inside me until I couldn't tell them apart. He reached out, hesitated, then dropped his hand. I'll go, he said quietly. I just needed you to know. He turned to leave. And for some reason, maybe mercy, maybe madness, I called out. Noah. He stopped. Stay. That was the first time we spoke without walls between us. And the moment his eyes met mine, I realized something terrifyingly simple. I'd never stopped loving him. The bridge had always been our quiet place, the only spot in town where the world seemed to pause long enough for us to breathe. Now, standing there again, I could feel the ghosts of who we were hovering in the air, two boys trapped between fear and longing, staring at each other as if time had never moved. Noah's hands were shoved deep in his jacket pockets. He looked unsure, like the ground beneath him could give way at any second. I had never seen him like that before, vulnerable, stripped of the arrogance he used to wear like armor. Do you still take pictures? He asked softly. Every day, I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. It's the only way I know how to tell the truth. He nodded, eyes drifting toward the lake. I still come here sometimes. Stupid, I know. But whenever life gets too loud, this place feels like the only spot that remembers me before I became someone I hate. The honesty in his voice cut through me. This wasn't the Noah Carter who once laughed in front of his friends. This was a man who'd been living with regret, and maybe that was worse. I crossed my arms. You had everything back then, friends, girls, a future. What did you hate about that? He laughed bitterly. That none of it was real. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy, the kind that feels sacred because it holds too much truth. The lake shimmered beneath the fading sun, and for a moment, I forgot to be angry. He looked up at me again. You left, Eli. You actually did it. You built a life. You're someone. I stayed here and just faded. I finished for him. He smiled sadly. Yeah, something like that. I wanted to tell him I hadn't been brave, that leaving had been my only option if I wanted to survive. But something in his eyes stopped me. Maybe he didn't need to hear that. Maybe he already knew. We ended up walking along the lakeshore, not talking much. The sky had turned a bruised shade of violet, and the cold air made every breath visible between us. There was so much I wanted to say, but the words felt too fragile for the moment. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd stayed? He asked suddenly. Every damn day, I said. But if I had, I don't think I'd still be me. He nodded. I used to imagine what I'd say if I ever saw you again. I'd tell myself I'd apologize, that I'd explain. But standing here now, none of it feels enough. It's not about words anymore, Noah. I know. He paused. I need you to know I never forgot you. Something inside me twisted painfully. I wanted to believe him, but the memory of that laughter still rang too loud in my head. You say that like it means something. It does, he insisted. Because every time I saw someone brave enough to be themselves, I thought of you. And every time I wasn't, I hated myself for it. We reached the end of the trail where the old picnic tables still stood. The wood was cracked, carved with initials from years ago, kids who thought their names would last forever. One of the carvings caught my eye, N+E 2015. I froze. He saw where I was looking and smiled. Sheepish. Yeah, I did that. Senior year. Guess I thought I was being clever. Clever. I turned to him. You carved our initials and then made fun of me in front of everyone the same week. His face fell. I know. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to love you without hating myself for it. The words hit harder than I expected. Because deep down I understood. I had hated myself too for wanting him, for believing he could want me back. I sat on the edge of the table, exhausted. You can't just show up after 6 years and expect everything to make sense. I don't expect that, he said. I wanted to see if there was still a chance. A chance for what? He hesitated. For forgiveness. For something new. That night, I stayed at my old house, my mother's place. She was gone for the weekend, so the silence felt both comforting and strange. The walls still smelled like coffee and rain. I went through my childhood room, touching the cracked desk, the faded posters. It was like walking through a museum of my own loneliness. At midnight, my phone buzzed. Noah, are you awake? I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. Yeah. Can I see you? Just to talk. Something in me said no. But another part, the part that had spent years photographing strangers trying to heal, said yes. We met at the diner on Main Street. It was nearly empty except for an old man reading the newspaper and a waitress refilling coffee. The place hadn't changed at all, same red booths, same flickering neon sign. Noah was already there, sitting in the corner with 2 mugs of coffee. He looked up as I walked in, smiling nervously. Didn't think you'd come. Neither did I said, sliding into the seat across from him. He pushed 1 cup toward me. Black, no sugar. You still drink it that way? I raised an eyebrow. You remember that? He shrugged. Some things stick. We talked not about the past, not yet. About Chicago, about his job fixing cars at his uncle's garage, about the people who left town and the ones who never did. Felt almost normal. Almost. Then, quietly, he said, I told my mom about you. I blinked. What? Last year. I told her what happened. That I liked you. That I was an idiot for not saying it then. I set the cup down carefully. What did she say? She said she already knew. I laughed, startled. You're serious? He smiled. Yeah. She said she always wondered when I'd stop pretending. We both laughed, then softly, tiredly, and for the first time in years, it didn't hurt. It just felt human. When the waitress came by with the check, Noah reached for it. I tried to argue, but he just smiled. Let me do one thing right tonight. We stepped outside. The air was colder, and the town was asleep. The streetlights painted everything in a dull amber glow. He looked up at the sky. You ever notice how quiet this place gets at night? Like it's holding its breath. Yeah, I said. It used to scare me. He turned to me then, his voice almost a whisper. It used to scare me too. But not anymore. Before I could respond, he reached out slowly, like he was afraid I'd vanish if he moved too fast. His fingers brushed mine. The touch was so light it almost wasn't real. I didn't pull away. For a moment, we just stood there, 2 silhouettes under the streetlight, and I realized something I hadn't let myself admit. The boy I'd loved was gone. The man standing in front of me wasn't perfect, but he was trying. And maybe that was enough. The next morning, I drove out to the bridge again, camera in hand. I wanted to capture the light, the fog, the stillness, all the things that used to make me feel small but now made me feel alive. Halfway through shooting, I heard footsteps. Noah. He didn't say anything at first. Just watched as I adjusted the lens. Finally, he asked, "Can I see through it?" I handed him the camera. He looked through the viewfinder and smiled. "It's like magic," he whispered. "The world looks softer in here." "That's the point," I said. He lowered the camera and looked at me, really looked. "You make everything look softer, Eli." I felt my throat tighten. "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Say things like that when you know I'm still trying to forget you." He stepped closer. "Maybe you're not supposed to." We were inches apart now. I could see the stubble on his jaw, the way his breath came out in small clouds. For a second, it felt like being 17 again, before fear, before pain, before the world taught us shame. "I'm not asking you to forget what I did," he said quietly. "I just want a chance to make new memories that hurt less." I closed my eyes, trying to steady myself. "You think it's that easy?" "No," he said. "But I think it's worth trying." He reached out again, this time not hesitating. His hand found the back of my neck, tentative but sure. I didn't move, couldn't. The moment felt suspended, fragile and infinite. Then, slowly, carefully, he kissed me. It wasn't the kiss I'd imagined for years. It wasn't desperate or hungry. It was soft, trembling, full of everything we never said. And for the first time, I didn't feel broken. When he pulled away, his eyes were wet. "I should have done that years ago." "Yeah," I whispered. "You should have." That night, I didn't go back to my mother's house. We drove to his apartment, a small place above the garage where he worked. It was messy, cluttered, full of oil stains and half-finished projects, but it felt real, lived in, human. He made coffee again, fumbling with the old machine. I laughed when he spilled some on the counter. He smiled like the sound was something he hadn't heard in a long time. "I missed that," he said softly. "You laughing." I sat on the worn couch watching him. "You say that like you ever gave me a reason to." He looked over, serious now. "I'm trying to." "I know." He sat beside me, close enough for our shoulders to touch. The silence between us wasn't heavy this time. It felt warm, like the quiet after a storm. As the night deepened, we really talked. About fear, about forgiveness, about the people we were and the men we were still becoming. He told me about his father, how disappointed he'd been when Noah quit college, how the silence between them stretched for years, how one day his father got sick, and all the anger didn't seem to matter anymore. "I was there when he died," Noah said, voice breaking slightly. "He held my hand and said he was proud of me." I asked him if he knew about me, and he said, "I've always known, son. I just wanted you to know it too." I reached for his hand without thinking. He squeezed it. "That's when I realized," he said, eyes glistening, "that I couldn't keep hiding. Not from the world. Not from you." I wanted to tell him how much those words meant, how many years I'd waited for them, but all I could do was sit there, our hands still intertwined, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the quiet rhythm of our breathing. Outside, the town slept. Inside, something finally woke. The morning light poured softly through the blinds, dust floating in golden streaks across the small apartment. I woke to the smell of coffee and the low hum of a radio playing some old country song that neither of us would ever admit to liking. For a moment, I didn't move. I just lay there, listening to the music, to his quiet footsteps, to the sound of something that felt dangerously close to peace. Noah turned when he noticed I was awake. His hair was messy, his t-shirt wrinkled, and yet, he looked lighter, like the weight he'd carried for years had finally begun to lift. "Morning," he said, voice warm and unsure. "Morning," I replied. He handed me a mug. Our fingers brushed, and that small touch carried everything we hadn't said yet: the apology, the forgiveness, the silent promise that we were both still learning how to be whole again. "You leaving today?" he asked, his tone careful. "Yeah. The exhibit ends tomorrow. I need to head back to Chicago." He nodded slowly, eyes flickering away for a second. Right? Makes sense. The quiet stretched between us again, not uncomfortable, but fragile. The kind of silence that asks questions without words. Noah, I said finally, you don't have to look at me like I'm already gone. He met my eyes. That's because I've seen you leave before. That hit harder than I expected. I put the mug down, stood, and walked to the window. The street below was still half asleep, the sunlight crawling across the rooftops. I left because I had to survive, I said quietly. But this time, it's not running. I know. His voice was soft. But it still feels like losing something I never stopped missing. We didn't talk much after that. We didn't need to. The morning moved slow, the kind of slow that makes you wish you could hold it still. When I finally packed my camera bag, Noah walked me to the car. The air outside was crisp, the sky clear. At the driver's side door, I turned to him. I don't know what happens next. Then don't try to, he said. Just let it. I smiled, the kind of smile that hurt a little, but in a good way. You're getting better at this whole feelings thing. He chuckled. Had a good teacher. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then, almost shyly, he reached out and cupped the back of my neck the same way he did on the bridge. Come back sometime, he whispered. I will, I said. But you could come too, you know. Chicago's big. No one cares who you hold hands with there. He smiled faintly. Maybe I'm not ready yet. That's okay, I said. I'll keep a place for you, just in case. And then, before I could change my mind, I leaned in and kissed him again, slow, certain, real. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a beginning disguised as one. The road out of town felt different this time. Not like an escape, but like a promise. I rolled the window down, letting the cold air sting my face, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from something. At a stoplight, my phone buzzed. A new message. You forgot something. It was from Noah. I frowned and checked the seat beside me, my jacket, my camera. Everything was there. What did I forget? A few seconds later, his reply came through. Me. I laughed, shaking my head, tears stinging my eyes in the best way. 3 months passed. The world spun on, as it always does. Chicago was gray and busy and loud, and somehow it felt more alive than ever. I threw myself into work, new shoots, new faces, new stories. But no matter how many people filled the frame, one face always lingered behind the lens. Then, one rainy evening, I was setting up a new gallery installation, a series called Homecomings. Each photo captured the feeling of return. Not to a place, but to a person. As I adjusted the final print, I heard the door open. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. Noah. He stood there, dripping wet, hair plastered to his forehead, denim jacket soaked through. He looked terrified and beautiful and alive. You came? I said, unable to hide the shock in my voice. He shrugged. You said no one cares who you hold hands with here. I figured I'd test that theory. I laughed, a shaky, breathless laugh that felt like relief. What about the garage? Sold my half. My mom said it was about time I started living instead of waiting. I walked toward him, slow, deliberate. So what now? He smiled, stepping closer until I could feel the rain still clinging to his skin. Now, he whispered. I stopped being the boy who let you go. We kissed then, not tentative, not afraid. The kind of kiss that says finally. Around us, the rain softened against the windows, the city lights reflecting off puddles like scattered stars. In that moment, I realized something simple and profound. Love doesn't erase the past. It rewrites it. Every scar, every silence, every cruel laugh, all of it led us here. To this, to him. Months later, our picture, the two of us on the bridge, laughing under the sunlight, hung in my next exhibit. The title read, The Quiet Boy, rewritten. People stopped, stared, smiled. Some asked about it, and I told them the truth, not the whole story, but enough. That it was about forgiveness. About the way love sometimes takes the long road home. When the crowd thinned, Noah slipped his hand into mine. You realize, he murmured, you've made us art. I smiled, squeezing his fingers. We always were. And maybe that's how it ends, not with fireworks or grand declarations, but with two men standing side by side, hearts finally quiet, knowing that the world will always try to make noise about love like ours. But we've learned something louder than fear. We've learned to stay. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.